This is Sarah Hendricks with Randolph-Macon College as part of the Living Legacies Oral History project. I'm here with Charles Lester Salmon, class of 1939 in Bremerton, Washington. Also present are his son Chuck, his daughter Nancy, and his daughter-in-law Ginger. The date is October 17th, 2010. To start, how did you first hear about Randolph-Macon College?
Through my dad. My dad was the Methodist minister, and he went to Randolph-Macon, I think, between 1914 and 1917. He didn't graduate because he met my mother up in New Jersey selling Bibles, and they fell in love, and I guess she couldn't wait to get away from her unhappy home life. And so they got married, I think, in 1917, and my dad went into the ministry a year before he graduated. That's the way I heard about Randolph-Macon.
Do you remember the first time you came to campus? Was it sort of a foregone conclusion that you would attend Randolph-Macon?
Yes. It was understood from the time I was in high school until I actually enrolled there. And the day I enrolled there was the first day I'd been to the campus. So I didn't have a chance to look around.
What were your first impressions of the college?
Well, I thought it was grand. It was kind of sheltered amidst the oaks and maples. And the buildings were, some of them were pretty run down. But the two dormitories were real nice. I lived in
Mary Branch or Thomas Branch?
Thomas Branch for the first 2 years, and then Mary Branch the last 2 years. But I thought it was beautiful. It was on the railroad track, so that was kind of a deterrent to enjoying life for the first few weeks I was there. Because the trains would come by every hour during the night and blow the whistles, and still the same, I guess.
Yeah, Ginger has a question.
Yeah.
Was that the one you told me when you got there you were in your short pants, where they called knickers or something like that?
Yeah,
Because you were only 16 or something?
no, I was 16, but I had an outfit that my mom had ordered from Sears Roebuck, and it had long pants, but it had one of these Eisenhower jackets that was really cool.
You thought it was cool at the time?
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
And you used that exact expression.
Yeah.
This is really a cool outfit.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe the expression back then was spiffy.
Did your parents take you to college down on your first day?
Yeah, my dad did. My mom stayed home with the little kids.
And how far away was your family house at that time? Where were you living at the time?
We were living at Matthews Courthouse,
Okay.
where I graduated from high school.
Was that like an hour away?
No, it was about an hour and a half away. The roads weren't very good in those days, and you couldn't go 65 and 70 like you can now. So it would take about an hour and a half to drive up there from Matthews.
So this must have been in September of the year you enrolled. Is that right?
1935.
September? you think?
1935.
Was it September that you actually?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Randolph-Macon continues to be expensive, and I'm sure it was expensive then. How did you afford your education? Did you have a job on campus?
Yes, I did.
Scholarships, that kind of thing? What did you do?
I raked leaves the first 2 months I was there. Then I got a job as janitor in the chemistry department, which was nice. But I had to get up every morning. If I didn't get the work done in the evening, I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get the lab and the chemistry lecture room cleaned out. And that wasn't very much fun if I had been out the night before.
Oh, you didn't do any of that, did you, Dad?
Didn't do any.
Partying?
I went out to Richmond occasionally,
How would you get to Richmond? Did you hitchhike? Yeah.
hitchhike. And once in a while I would take the streetcar back. They used to have a streetcar running between Richmond and Ashland.
Huh.
And
So would you go to the bars then, or the?
no,
I mean, why would you go into Richmond?
to go to a movie or
Oh, okay.
to
I wasn't drinking in those.
date a girl or something.
Date a girl.
Yeah.
Where were you?
So, going back to getting on campus, when you arrived as a freshman, did you who did you meet? Did you have a roommate? Do you have an
No.
impression of meeting, I guess it was Blackwell? Who was the president then?
Blackwell. And I remember Dr. Blackwell because he was in the opening pages of our annual, and he was escorting Audrey Hepburn through the campus.
Really?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Frank Boldridge has photographs of that.
Oh, is that right?
That's right.
Huh.
Did you see Audrey Hepburn?
Did I see her?
Mhm.
No. No, I didn't see her. But Dr. Black.
You were too busy working in the chemistry lab, weren't you, Dad?
Well, Dr. Blackwell died the first year I was in college,
Oh.
and Dr. Hatcher took over as temporary president.
And Hatcher was the treasurer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was treasurer, but he was acting president for the remaining 3 years I was there, I think.
Was Dr. Blackwell a storied president? I mean, had he been there
Oh,
for many years?
Yes,
Yeah.
he was a student at Randolph-Macon. He then came back to teach and became president shortly thereafter. I think he was something like 75 years old when he died, and
Wow.
minus 18 years, the sort of first 18 years that he was alive, he was continually affiliated with the college. He
Right.
helped it grow enormously.
Yeah.
He's
was there
very,
when-
very storied.
So he was there when your dad was there, Dad?
Yeah, he would have been.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think he became president in 1898, something like that. So he's very much, and if you're on campus today, just about everything is seemingly named after Blackwell. I mean, the auditorium,
Yeah.
several of the houses.
Hmm.
He's an imposing figure. The pictures of him, he looks very much like Robert E. Lee. I guess he was a
Yeah.
distinguished looking guy in addition to...
Yeah, he had a full beard and mustache, I think.
hmm
He was a distinguished looking gentleman.
He must have known your father.
I suppose he did. I didn't. I never remember talking to him directly. But
Did you belong to a fraternity, Dad?
I pledged the fraternity. I didn't have enough money to join it.
Which fraternity?
Phi Delta Theta. I was a pledge, and I played on their intramural teams and
You okay?
things like that. But I never joined it.
What other activities did you participate in?
Well, I was on the swim team the first year I was there.
Where did you swim?
Where did I swim?
Where was the pool?
It was in the old auditorium, old gymnasium.
And they had a pool in there, Dad?
Yeah, they had a pool.
Gee.
The old gym that had the scores painted on it?
Yeah,
I had no idea they had a pool in there.
yeah.
I'm looking at your sophomore yearbook, and it says you were on the Washington Literary Society.
Yeah.
What did that involve?
Well, just debating.
Book reviews.
Yeah,
Because there was a debate team. I don't think you were on the debate.
At Randolph-Macon, there's the Washington Literary Society and then the Franklin Debating Society. They're essentially, I think, kind of, you're either on one or the other.
Oh.
And in the main building, which on campus is Washington Franklin Hall, one side's for the Washington Literary Society, the other side's for the Franklin
Yeah.
Debating. So it's,
Okay.
and I think,
It's like a club.
yeah, and they both were started the year that the college was founded in 1835. So they're
Oh, that's good.
they're
That's
incredibly
neat.
traditional, yeah,
That's
and they still exist now. And
That's awesome.
the debating team still wins big award, national awards and whatever.
yeah.
And you didn't play any sports, did you, Dad?
No, I thought I was going to turn out for tennis, but my folks saved up and bought me a tennis racket just before I went to school, and I had it in the bottom drawer of my dresser. And before I could even get it out and play, somebody stole it. I never saw it again.
At a good church, at a good church school, or what if we?
Yeah,
Probably came from Sears and Roebuck, too.
Yeah. Gee.
it was a Bancroft, I remember.
Did you report it to the authorities, Dad? And
I don't remember.
must have been really disappointing.
But you went on to play tennis as you got older, and
Well, yeah, but I didn't play any in college because those guys that were on the tennis team had all been on tennis teams in high school, and they'd had a lot of good instruction, and I had had none of that. So
You mentioned you were on the swim team. Who did you swim against?
I remember one match we had was against Johns Hopkins up in Baltimore. I swam the relay, and I was so slow that I think that they were about ready to go out and drag me out of the water. I wasn't much of a swimmer.
Well, all of your training was in the probably in the backwaters of the river area
Yeah.
that you guys grew up in, around
Yeah,
Tides Inn, or where the Tides Inn now is
Yeah.
located.
Yeah.
Irvington.
Yeah.
in Irvington. Yeah,
And you also were in the Glee Club.
yeah, that was fun.
Did you guys travel?
Yeah, we traveled around the state quite a bit. We went as far as Roanoke, I remember. And
so it looks like it was more than just singing.
Yeah, I think they went to the girls' colleges a lot, as a matter
But
of
they
fact.
did they put on costumes and have like little,
no,
no?
I don't think so.
Did you sing in the churches or just at other colleges? What type of venues did y'all sing in?
Well, in churches mainly. And I sang in the chapel choir at the college. We had chapel every day. And we'd have to run to get up in the chapel choir before everybody else was seated. And Harvey Ashby played the piano. He became a district superintendent, and I understand he's dead now.
What was did you have practices throughout the week, Dad? Did you have to turn out for practice as well as?
Yeah, we had practice, I think, one day a week, one night a week.
Remember who your choir, or who your chorus director was?
Yeah, it was named Troxel.
Yeah, Bill Troxel,
Yeah,
storied guy on campus.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
he's still, the name is still famous around there, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I'm seeing you here in the Glee Club, Dad. You were a second tenor.
Yeah,
And there's a picture, it's called Harbor Lights, and you're all in costumes.
oh, is that right?
Some in ladies' dresses.
Gee, what is it about choruses and men?
Yeah.
You know.
Men's choir. No women.
Yeah, yeah. So there were no women that went to Randolph-Macon at the time?
Yeah, there were a few women at Randolph-Macon, but they didn't live on campus. They lived in the community.
Hmm.
Yeah, the day student. Local girls were allowed to
Yeah.
attend.
Oh, from Ashland.
Hmm.
Oh,
Just Ashland. I mean,
interesting.
not Richmond.
Yeah,
And
they
just
were.
women in that area weren't going to school. Is that the reason? Because they had no rights?
Well, I think it had more to do with that they were just separated at that time. I mean, there's Randolph-Macon College, of course. There's also, or was Randolph-Macon Women's College.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Holland, Sweetbriar, Mary Baldwin, Mary Washington, Longwood.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of women's colleges in the area,
Yeah.
most of which have gone co-ed now. But
Yeah,
and I think typically the Randolph-Macon guys, you ran around with the Mary Washington girls the most, right?
say again.
Did you? Where did you date? Where did you meet the girls you dated?
Oh, at Randolph-Macon, I met with a girl named Mary Hillman for about 2 years.
And Dad, was she like a student at Mary Washington? Where were the
No.
other students that when you dated? What were the girls? Were there girls at another girls' college that you would date?
Yeah, there was some up at Mary Washington,
Mm-hmm.
which is in Fredericksburg. That was the closest we had. Lynchburg, which is where Randolph-Macon Women's College was probably 100 miles away.
Well, I'm looking in this album, and it's got a page for co-eds, and it's only showing 3 women, and then it goes over into these.
Sweethearts, the fraternity sweethearts.
Yeah, so these were all the women that were at the school?
No, they could be, but for the most part, the women will be in with the classes. If you go through, you'll see a women's picture.
Okay.
Those sweethearts were mostly like a wife of a fraternity brother. They were just sort of popular women, most of whom did not attend Randolph-Macon, or at least that's my general understanding.
Okay.
But certainly some of them. When you were there, did you have roommates? Who were they, if you did?
Did I have what?
A roommate?
Yes, I did. For the last 3 years, I had a roommate named Barham Honeycutt, and he was my best friend. And I saw him in 1989 when I went back for the 50th class reunion, and it was nice to get together with him.
Where did you see him, Dad?
At the 50th class reunion in 1989.
Where was he from, Dad?
He was living in Richmond then, but he'd retired from the Mooney Aircraft Company. He was the comptroller for the Mooney Aircraft Company.
Oh.
Right before you got ill this last time, Dad had a rough patch there, and right before you got sick, you had me try to find a couple people at the college, and was that you I was dealing with? And one of them was
Hardaway Abernathy?
Yeah.
Abernathy,
Well, yeah, I remember him. He was in my class.
but who was the other one?
I was Bill Sanders. He was in the class behind me, but we were good friends.
Yeah. And we just never got around to contacting them. I know you said one of them was hard of hearing, so I knew that would be difficult
Hard of
for
hearing.
Dad because he doesn't hear very well as well. And the other one I think didn't have an email, and
Yeah, Frank Boldridge, who was another one you asked about, he definitely has an email address, and he's up in Rixieville, Virginia.
Do you remember him, Dad?
Yeah,
He probably was a chemistry major with you.
yeah. He was, I think he became one of the professors there.
Yes, he did.
Frank Boldridge, I think.
Mm-hmm. Incidentally, what was your major?
I was chemistry and biology. That was about it.
Who do you remember your advisor? Who was your advisor?
I didn't have an advisor. That's one thing that I missed, because I kind of floundered the first year or two until I found my way. And one reason that I was, I didn't have an advisor. They either never appointed one for me, or if they did, I never visited with him. So it was kind of a lost period for me.
Do you remember any of your teachers?
Yeah.
I know I was reading that, one of your other oral histories to Dad, and there was a lot of people that, whoever that gentleman was, and I have it around here. But Dad, it helped Dad remember, is there teachers that are listening
at
here?
the front, I think. Was Schuyler Miller there when you were? Was Schuyler Miller a chemistry professor when you were?
Noel Cantor.
Nolan Cantor.
Noel Cantor. I remember him very well. And Dr. T. Grillette Simpson.
Mm-hmm. Who later, of course, went on to become president of Mary Washington.
Oh, did he?
He did.
Okay. And then there was a T. McNider Simpson, who was a math professor.
Mm-hmm. His son, Daniel Simpson, lives here in Seattle. His son lives in Seattle.
Is that right?
Dan Simpson.
My goodness.
Mm-hmm.
That's a small world. Are you going to interview him, or?
No, but I think I'll probably see him.
Okay.
His brother, Henry Simpson, has done an oral history. He's class of 52.
Okay.
Maybe you could tell Dad who has done oral histories from his class. You remember?
From the 30s, we've had one by Shim Forrest and his brother George Forrest.
George Forrest. I think he was in my class, wasn't he?
I believe so. And there was a guy named Denny Compton, who's older than you, but a big football player. I think he graduated in 35 or 36.
Okay.
Paul Warnham, who's class of 37,
Okay.
who was probably a biology major.
Mm-hmm.
Hardaway Abernathy, of course, Frank Boldridge.
Yeah, he became a high school principal and a superintendent of schools,
Mm-hmm.
I think, down in Emporia.
Yeah. Curtis Saunders, who was class of, I guess, 43 maybe. So he would have been there when you were there.
Uh-huh.
Jack Russell.
I don't remember him.
Good memory.
I know there are others too, but
Yeah.
I can't think of
You
them.
need your website.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there's some that aren't on there.
Oh.
And then there's some, because of course during the war the class years got a little screwy. But George Oliver, who's 49, but he should have graduated in 45, I think.
Mhm.
But of course had to leave.
No, I
for the
didn't
war.
know him.
Actually, his roommate lives on Bainbridge Island, a guy named Reverend Evans, Marvin Evans.
Oh, is that right?
You know him, Dad?
No. Huh.
But
He lives on Bainbridge Island then.
mhm,
I'll be darned.
yeah.
Could be a neighbor of Chuck's.
Huh.
Never know.
Chuck lives on
Marvin.
Bainbridge.
What's the last name?
Evans?
Evans, he's a retired Unitarian minister.
Marvin?
Yeah, he went to, after Randolph-Macon, he went to Duke. Um,
Well, there's only 20,000 people live on Bainbridge Island, so.
Did you have to take a language?
Yeah, I took German for 2 years.
With Professor Haley?
Yeah, good. That's great. And then Bob Parker, who graduated a year ahead of me, came back to teach German for a year. But I wasn't in his class. Bob Parker was a Methodist minister that was a very close friend of mine. He was in a class ahead of me. And really outstanding man. He became president of Shenandoah College up in Winchester. And he was a minister for some real outstanding churches around Richmond area.
Did you have to take Bible class at that time?
Yeah. What was his name?
Terry, maybe?
Dr. Terry, yeah. Yeah. I took Bible for at least 3 years. And I enjoyed it, really.
Did you have to be a Methodist to go to that school?
No.
It is a Methodist college, the oldest Methodist college in America, but it's no, I mean,
Right.
and actually, as a matter of fact, I think to prove the point that you didn't in fact have to be a Methodist, both John Randolph and Nathaniel Macon, for whom the school is named, were not Methodists.
Oh,
But I think they chose that intentionally to.
Oh. and why is it named after the two men? You know that?
Named after the...
Randolph and Macon.
Well, Randolph was the governor of Virginia at one time, before the Civil War. And Macon was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence.
And they were both from that area?
Kind of. Randolph was. Nathaniel Macon, I believe, was from North Carolina.
Yeah.
But at that time, the Virginia Conference, which was of the Methodist Church, which essentially founded the school, I think they went into North Carolina. I think at that time the conference went down. It went up into Maryland and then down into North Carolina, I think.
So
I think that's right.
Can you explain the Methodist Conference to me? I know your dad, that's who he worked for, right? I mean, he was part of that.
The Virginia Conference of the Methodist
Virginia
Church.
Conference of the Methodist Church.
Yeah.
Is that the same group that started the college?
Mhm, and we're still affiliated with them, as a matter of fact.
And is that just, can you kind of explain what that is? Is it just?
Well, it's just a group of churches that band together, and they appoint bishops, and the bishop actually selects the district superintendents, and the district superintendents select the ministers and send them to the various churches around at the conference. That's the way it used to work.
Yeah.
It's probably just the geographic
Yeah.
affiliation of churches on a national, from a national perspective. You
Yeah.
probably divided up the country in different areas, and the
Yeah.
Virginia Conference would be.
So there's one in Seattle, you think? I mean.
Sure there is.
Okay.
Yeah, the Northwest Conference.
Okay.
Yeah, and Virginia actually has two conferences, the Holston Conference and Virginia Conference.
Hmm.
Because your father was in the Virginia Conference, you probably had to move every 4 years.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Every 2 to 3 years or 4 years. I think we stayed in one place 4 years, but that was the rule. Thankfully they've changed now. The minister can stay as long as the congregation wants them.
Do you think the more frequent moving that your family did, Dad, was a consequence of the controversial article that your dad wrote?
Well, after he wrote it, it had something to do with it. But before he wrote it, we were moving every 2 or 3 years.
What was the article, may I ask?
It was about the injustice to the black race. My dad invited the black people of the community to come to church, and once in a while you'd see a black person on the back row. But I remember him spending a lot of time transporting the real sick people from where we lived to Richmond to the hospital. So he was a champion of the black people, and he wrote this article castigating the Methodist Conference for its attitude towards the black people, because they still were living in the pre-Civil War area. And
I sure wish we could get a copy of that. Would that be something that they have at the school?
They probably would, yeah. They certainly came up
Boy,
with it.
that would be a treasure.
yeah,
Wouldn't you love to read that, Dad?
yeah, I would.
Wasn't there kind of a falling out? I mean, he was still obviously dedicated to the church and all, but I got the impression that kind of the power structure of the church was not pleased that he did that.
No, they weren't.
And he got kind of the backwoods assignments type of thing.
Yeah, I did. We got sent from Kilmarnock to Cobb's Creek, which was the North Matthews Conference. I'm confused now.
Did you know you wanted to be a doctor at that time, Dad?
Yeah,
So you were kind of zeroing in on the classes that you thought would be
Yeah.
appropriate.
yeah,
And you probably got some feedback about what you needed to have in the way of different class categories in order to graduate, right?
yeah. I don't remember specifically anybody helping me with that, though.
It's pretty subtle then if they did it.
Yeah,
And you have a good memory, Dad.
That's a fact.
So at Randolph-Macon, you had a nickname, which I believe people still, at least the Randolph-Macon guys, still call you.
Fish.
Fish. Who started that? I mean, I assume that Fish came from Salmon, your last name, but
It started the first week I was there. I forget the name of the guy that started. His name was Forrest.
Was he in your class, Dad?
Yeah,
George Forrest?
George Forrest, I think. And
Called him Forrest.
I think he started calling me Fish. He had a service where he would sell candy and other goodies. He was like the local vendor for candy companies, you know.
Just to earn money, you mean, Dad?
Yeah, just to earn money.
The candy man.
Yeah.
So speaking of food, I know in the 1930s there was no dining room on campus. Where did you eat? How did you get
I ate
Food.
at a boarding house about half a mile down the tracks towards Richmond. Forget the name of the lady that ran it, but I ate there for 2 meals a day, and the third meal was just on our own to pick up at a pool hall or something like that.
Is that how they did it back then? They just had people in the community that would make food for the students?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
How many boys ate at this particular boarding house?
probably 10 or 12.
Did you stay with her all 4 years?
I think the last 3 years I started there after the first year. And one of the guys that I remember became a famous writer, and he's been written up in the Randolph-Macon Campus Review. His name was, oh boy.
Was he in your class, Dad?
No, he was in the class behind me. What was his name?
He wrote books that were published and
Novels?
Well, he wrote a daily syndicated article.
Oh, the Daily Bread?
Daily Bread, yeah.
Purnell Bailey?
Yeah, Purnell Bailey. He ate at that place.
Jeez.
And Bob Parker ate there.
historian.
That's right, yeah. It's amazing.
You're talking to somebody who's, you've met your match, Dad. We've always been so in awe of Dad's memory for names and stuff that,
Well, Purnell Bailey's he wrote this syndicated article called Daily Bread, and my family are big Methodists, and I remember my grandmother would.
Hmm.
Was it published in newspapers or?
Yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, and it was like a sort of maybe there was a quote, like a scripture quote, and then just a 3 lines sort of describing how to enact that in your daily life. You know, those like
Just a little-
calendars with
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You know,
Words of
Wow.
wisdom type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Dad, people that lived in the dormitories like you, they had to find their food through boarding houses.
Yeah.
But then were there people that lived in the fraternities, or was that just like a club? Because I saw in here they had house pictures of the fraternity
The
homes,
fraternities, I think they had their own cooks,
and they lived there. Okay.
and they lived there. But as I say, I never joined the fraternity. I played Phi Delta Theta, but I never joined it because I didn't have the money.
How much money were they requiring for membership, do you know?
I think it was probably $25 a year or something like that.
$25 a year.
No, $25 to join.
Oh, to join.
Yeah.
Dad, did you put yourself through college, or did your father help you out?
He helped me as much as he could.
And then the rest of the money you made by working
Yeah.
around the college?
Yeah.
At that time, I know at some point they had this. I don't know when they started and or when they stopped, for that matter. But at one point, the sons of Methodist ministers in the Virginia Conference got some type of discounted tuition. Was that the case when you were a student, or it might not have begun then, or
It
conversely? It might have-
probably was. I can't remember exactly. But I imagine that if it was in vogue there, I'm sure I took part in it. I don't remember specifically.
Did you finish early, Dad?
Did I finish?
Did you go to college for 4 years? Or
Yeah. I went for 4 years, yeah.
And after you graduated, what did you do?
I went to medical school at Randolph-Macon. I mean, at Medical College of Virginia in Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
And I,
So you did graduate from Randolph, because at that point you didn't have to have a college degree to go to medical school, is that correct?
No, that's right.
Really?
Yeah, and so a lot of young men would attend Randolph-Macon for 3 years,
Yeah,
not graduate, but I guess get all the required classes,
yeah.
and then go directly to MCV.
Huh, wonder why you didn't do that, Dad. Maybe that wasn't going on at that time?
Well, it was going on, but I didn't get the required classes.
I didn't even know your clock would do that.
Shut your rooster up there.
He doesn't see well. He's got vision problems and that. He can press a button and it'll tell you what time
It's
it is.
basically a farm boy, that's.
There you
What's that?
Carpenter will do.
go. So what you're saying is you didn't get the grades to get out early? Is that?
Well, that's part of it, and I didn't take the required classes for entry until my last 2 years when I
Well,
thought
you
of,
were pretty slow in developing. So I remember you always saying when you went to college you was 16. But in our family, when we're 16, we don't look like we're 16. We look like we're 14.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Maybe 13?
Maybe 13.
Yeah.
At least that would be me, and I think you.
Yeah.
And probably Dad. So he was very.
Well, you
Mature.
You're young.
You about 5'4" or 5'3", Dad, when you
Yeah.
get into school.
And
Yeah.
scrawny, just.
No, you look like a little kid.
and I weighed
He was a little kid.
I weighed 110 pounds.
It's true.
And that had to be really difficult
That's
going
less
in.
than what I weigh.
So it's understandable, Dad, that that was probably an adjustment for you.
Yeah.
How often did you see your parents?
Oh, probably once every 2 or 3 months. I would thumb a ride. About a month after I went to college, they moved from Matthews Courthouse to Colonial Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And I would thumb a ride up to Fredericksburg and then try to thumb a ride down to Colonial Beach from Fredericksburg. I remember the first time I did it, I ended up walking about 10 miles.
Jeez.
But I finally got there.
Yep. You mentioned that you ate your meals in a boarding house and you lived in the dorms. How did you do things like your laundry? Did you take your laundry home, or did you?
We did it ourselves.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
You washed it in the sink?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Of course, he probably had one pair of pants and one shirt. And
Yeah, was there a dress code? Did you have to wear one of those beanies?
Yeah.
Fish cap?
Yeah.
you're very dressed up in a lot of these pictures, though, Dad. Like for the Glee Club, you have like a really nice black suit on, and
Yeah, well, tuxedo. I used to have to
Yeah.
rent one every
you had to rent it.
time we had a performance. I'd have to rent it, and it would cost like $10, I think, to rent.
Oh. How about the suit that you're wearing in your pictures? Did you have to buy a suit to get your senior picture taken?
No, I don't know.
You owned a suit.
Yeah,
One suit is the same suit in each picture.
Yeah, probably all 4 years.
So you went to Medical College of Virginia,
yeah.
and what did you do after that? I mean, what was sort of your professional?
Then I took, when I was junior, I got a job at Grace Hospital in Richmond as an extern, as compared to an intern. Intern, it was a graduate medical student, and an extern was a pre-graduate. And I got a job there as an extern and worked for 2 years for Dr. Herring. And he talked me into staying on for a year of surgical internship, which I was qualified for, but when I came out to Washington State, I had to take a year of rotating internship to qualify for the Washington State boards. What about the war years?
How you went into to fight the war, and then your medical history when you were in Burma and all that.
Well, yeah,
I don't know if that's part of the oral history, but
It certainly is.
After I finished a year of internship, I kept bugging them to take me into the service because I had one bad eye that I had ruptured the retina when I was 5 years old, and a baseball hit me in the eye and ruptured the retina, and I had limited vision in that eye. So I had to actually beg them to take me into the service. I wanted to be in the service because all my friends were going in. And I finally got into the Army Medical Corps, and I was stationed at Fort Ord, California, and I met my wife and fell in love with her. And we were engaged after a week. And
This is in 1944, Dad, or 43?
1944.
44,
she was a nurse.
And
Army nurse.
then I got sent over to India and Burma, where I worked with the Chinese as like a little portable surgical hospital. And we had to carry our supplies on muleback, and we'd get resupplied by airdrop about once a week. And
There's like 30 people in your unit and 2 doctors.
yeah,
You were called the 13th Mountain Medical Battalion,
yeah,
and your purpose was to go follow the Chinese,
yeah,
and you were giving aid to the Chinese.
yeah.
And Japanese even, some occasional Japanese prisoners would be, I think, did you treat a Japanese colonel or something, Dad, that was captured?
That's right.
Well, yeah. That was in Tokyo, though,
Oh, that was during the Korean War.
at the Korean War.
I'm sorry, yeah. These were actually predecessor field hospitals to what became known as MASH units during the Korean War.
Yeah,
But these were the predecessor of the MASH units, and they were basically, as Dad said, they were like mule-supported field hospitals that would traipse you all over the back country areas following the different troops.
And at that point, had you attended medical school, or?
yeah. I had finished
Okay.
medical school, and I graduated in March of '43.
Okay. And then entered. Gotcha.
And I took a 10 months surgical internship at Grace Hospital in Richmond, which is now closed. But
Where on Grace Street was it?
it was on Grace Street.
What was the cross street what was the actual location on Grace Street? Do you remember, Dad, or the address?
No, I don't remember the cross street. It was about halfway out to from downtown. It was about halfway out to Chamberlain Avenue. No, not Chamberlain Avenue.
Boulevard? Or Hermitage?
Boulevard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dad had kind of an interesting and unique qualification as a result of his getting his MD and then having this year of externship. Weren't you under the wing of one of the surgeons there?
Yeah.
He'd had a lot more surgical experience than most doctors that were out in general practice had in many years. So when he went into the war, he was kind of uniquely qualified to handle combat wounds and trauma than a lot of the other
Why
doctors
did he
did.
have more?
Because he had this extra training before he was shipped out, before he went into the
that
army.
most people didn't have?
Most
before they-
most doctors that would get out of their they'd get their MD.
Yeah.
They were just basically general practitioners. They didn't have any really extra special training around surgical techniques. But Dad had that experience by this externship that he had with this surgeon.
I didn't get that, okay.
It was a doctor that kind of took Dad under his wing because he thought he had some skills, and it turned out.
Yeah, his name was Dr. Herring.
Herring?
Herring.
Dr. Salmon and Dr. Herring?
Yeah,
You got to be kidding me.
No, I'm not.
Was Dr. Trout often the...
Yeah, there was a Dr. Trout out in Roanoke.
You guys could have created a group practice that would have been a real hit with fishermen.
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah.
Our sister, when she was in college, she lived with the Lori Fish.
Oh,
Linda Salmon and Lori
Oh my
Fish.
God. But Dad actually, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. He did a biography. He did a book, and in that book, he's got several pages and/or chapters that talk about his experiences when he was over in the China, Burma, India theater, and it was pretty amazing. But anyway, then after the war, he came right back and married Mom within a week of being back.
I only knew her 2 weeks, you know.
Yeah.
That's a leap of faith.
It was love at first sight, it really was.
yeah, but the way he got to know her was the way they should do it these days, was by writing letters.
Writing letters,
So,
yeah. Because she went to France. My mom went to France, and Dad was over in Burma.
Well, then she was part of the Japanese occupation forces. So.
Yeah, in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And she was from this area. She lived in Aberdeen, which is over on the coast. Her parents did. And I think initially when you first got married, the plan was you were going to move back to Virginia.
Yeah.
And how did that get changed, Dad?
Well, I just grew to like the area out here.
I can see that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful here.
And Mom didn't want to leave. Once she got pregnant and started having,
Yeah.
she had Chuck, and then she had me, and her parents were fairly close. She didn't like the idea of going back to Virginia.
Did during this time though, did you ever get back to Virginia? I mean, did you ever come to campus? Did you stay in touch with Randolph-Macon at all?
A little bit.
Football games, that kind of thing.
I got back for the 50th class reunion, and I met Susan Donovan. And then when I came back with the girls about 7, 8 years ago, we were traveling around the state visiting old places that we used to live. And I took them to Ashland, and we visited the alumni office, and Susan she still remembered me, which is nice. She's a sweetheart.
She is.
She took us all over campus.
She's a
remember
wonderful
that.
woman.
Yeah. I remember going into the chapel.
Yeah,
It was real fun for Dad to walk around the campus and
yeah.
it brought
The
back a
chapel
lot of
had changed a lot.
Was there something about the train? Was there a train that went right through the?
Yeah, there's.
RF&P.
Yeah. Was there a story about that train?
Well, the only stories is that several of my dad's brothers worked for the railroad.
That's right.
I think Allen and
Mm-hmm.
Elam.
Elam. I think 3 of them.
Wilmer?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, Wilma, worked for he was killed he was crushed between 2 cars.
Yeah.
He got caught somehow, and
He was a young man.
yeah.
That's his father's brother. So did they stop and see you at school, Dan, when they were? Were they on the trains that went through?
No, I never had him stop. No, I never got to ride the train.
With the tracks right through the campus?
Yeah,
I feel like they
Yeah.
were.
Oh, yes, they definitely still are too.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, from my office, the light fixtures shake. You know,
Is that
Right across the
yeah,
tracks.
because I'm on the other side of the tracks from the rest of the campus.
Wow.
Yeah,
What buildings are still there, do you think?
Oh, a big part of what we call the historic campus, which was built in the sort of 1870s, right after the Civil War. They moved Randolph-Macon from Boynton, Virginia to Ashland, Virginia. Those are all on the National Historic Registry, like
Okay.
Washington Franklin Hall.
What year did they move it?
1870, 1879.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Washington Franklin Hall, the Old Chapel, the Pace Hall, which I guess
Mhm.
maybe is where the chemistry labs were.
Uh-huh.
The library, the McGraw, Walter Hines Page
Yeah.
Library, that has moved, but that building is now called Peel Hall, and that's where the administration is. Of course,
Okay.
Thomas Branch and Mary Branch are still there.
Okay.
Alumni Gym, which would have been the
dorms
new
are still
gym.
there
It's
where
a
you
new
live?
gym.
Yeah, and one of the dorms, they did a fabulous job renovating. The other dorm, Mary Branch, is still has no air conditioning, and that's in
Whoa.
Virginia. Which,
Really?
Wow.
Whoa.
Don't want to go summer quarter.
So there's a lot of that stuff is very much still there. I think there are several of the faculty houses, some of the old clapboard houses.
Mhm.
The building in which President Blackwell lived is now
Mhm.
the business office.
I think the alumni office is probably in the building that Dr. Cantor used to live in.
That's where I work.
Okay.
I don't remember this, is that a train?
That's the train station.
Is that still there?
That's very much still there.
Oh.
I'm going to pause this for one
Okay.
second.
For it.
Okay, so what were the academic buildings when you were a student?
Well, I remember the building that chemistry was in, I think it's called Pace Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And the biology department was in,
Was that in Pettyjohn?
could have been. I'm not sure.
Where was your German classes?
I think they were on the second floor of Pace Hall.
Oh.
The chemistry was on the first floor, I remember.
Now, you said that you sometimes had to get up at 5 a.m. to go clean up the chemistry labs. Did
Yeah.
you have a key, or were the buildings always open?
I think they were open because I don't remember ever having a key.
And now, sort of jumping back to after you graduated from Randolph-Macon, when you moved to Washington as a doctor, what type of medicine did you practice?
General surgery. After I got out of World War II and we got married, I moved to Seattle and I took 3 years of surgery at Swedish Hospital. And incidentally, that's the hospital that my son and my daughters were born.
Right up the hill from where you're staying.
I love the name of this Grace Hospital, Swedish Hospital.
Yeah,
Linda was born there too, Dad.
yeah,
You lived here, but Mom wanted to go back to the doctor in Seattle, I think.
yeah. Anyway,
That's where Chuck works now. He works for Swedish Hospital.
yeah.
Full circle. They'll probably die there too.
Don't say that. So sorry to interrupt you, Dad. So
That's
you
all right.
you came here and you worked for Swedish as an
And that-
intern.
Then
He was a resident.
Oh, a resident.
Yeah,
Okay.
He was chief resident.
and I came to Bremerton in 1949 and joined two other fellows that were in a little setup they called the Jackson Clinic. And I said I'd join them to do the surgery if they changed the name to the doctor's clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. And now a doctor's clinic has about 80 physicians.
Oh, good grief.
They're all board certified.
It's the largest multi-specialty group practice in this county. They've got several locations, and Dad is the sole surviving founder of the group.
You gonna tell her about the building named after you?
Well, they built a beautiful multi-specialty clinic out in Silverdale which they named the Charles L. Salmon Clinic.
It was about 10 years ago, right, Dad?
It was about 5 years ago. And it's a beautiful building.
That must be fun.
Yeah, it was nice.
Real
What's
honor.
what's really
Oh,
what's
sure.
really kind of ironic about this is that when Dad came over to join these other two doctors, he had kind of an aversion to having the establishment named after a single person, and so he kind of pushed to have the name Jackson Clinic dropped and have Doctor's Clinic instead.
And
now it's full circle.
Full circle.
And so 85 years later, when the Doctor's Clinic are making this major investment in building this new facility that's going to be their flagship facility, I got a call from their executive director, Linda Brown, and she said, you know, we want to talk to your dad about naming the building after him, but I've heard this story that maybe he would not appreciate having structures named after him. And I said, well, there's a lot of time that's passed.
Yeah.
That's why it came about. Why don't you give him a call and see what he thinks?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but Dad is very modest. And he was totally blown away when that honor was bestowed on him. It was really
Well,
great.
it came at a good time because he was getting to that point where he'd go into a doctor's clinic and he'd say, I'm Dr. Salmon, I have an appointment, and nobody would even know that he was the founder of the clinic, and it would hurt his feelings a little bit. So and that
Well,
happened.
now that doesn't happen.
Now, you
Not
walk
anymore.
in and there's a great big, huge picture of him. It says Salmon Center across the front of it. And then they ooh and ah over him as they should. So it was a wonderful
Well, and the reason
honor.
they didn't know him is because he been so healthy his whole life. He never
Yeah,
hardly
and
goes
just
in.
the turnaround. The people that were there are young people that
It's gotten
haven't been
big.
in the community.
It's gotten
and
big, yeah, truly.
But so, besides your 50th reunion and returning a few years ago, how did you keep up with any of your classmates, or?
Bill Casey, it was about the only one that I corresponded with. Honeycutt I corresponded with until he died about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. And Bill Casey is the only one that I still keep in touch with through Christmas cards.
Where does he live, Dad?
He lives in Newport News, which is right across the Hampton Roads from Virginia Beach and Norfolk.
Yeah, close to Williamsburg.
Okay. We should have gone to see him when we went back for a little trip.
Well, yeah.
Did you hear how he said that? He said Newport News. I said, Dad, it's Newport. Newport News.
Newport News.
Newport News.
Newport.
Yeah.
What are you saying? It's not Newport?
He's lost his Virginia
Yeah, it's
accent.
Oh.
people in Virginia say Newport News.
Newport. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
He's lost his Virginia accent
Newport.
for 80 years.
They have a huge shipbuilding
Yeah.
company
Oh.
there that's similar to the shipyard that's in Bremerton.
Probably a little larger.
Yeah,
Wow.
It's huge. I mean, it's huge.
yeah. They build the large aircraft carriers and things back there.
Like nuclear submarines and stuff.
Wow. Well, I think Dad would love to get a hold of some of these classmates, but
Absolutely.
it's hard for him to hear on the phone. But, and you did send me, I think, a couple addresses, but
Yeah, I can pull the whole list.
like I said, we just kind of got lost. He got sick and then
Yeah,
got on the back burner, but I know he'd sure love to see anybody if they ever came up this way,
Sure.
wouldn't you, Dad?
yeah.
Now, that kind of just, I've kind of have gone through all of our questions. Is there anything you sort of would like to add? To touch on any particular memories, any stories about what you guys would do for fun, or anyone who had a particular impact on you, or
No, I can't think of anything.
What was the highlight of your 4 years, Dad?
At Randolph-Macon.
Yeah,
Um,
just the friends you made, maybe, and
yeah. I guess the highlight was singing in the Glee Club.
really.
Yeah, because I really enjoyed that.
And did you say when you went to college, you knew right away you wanted to be a doctor? Did you know when you entered that you were going to be a doctor?
No, I didn't know what I was going to be then, but I had it in the back of my mind that if I could make it, I'd like to go to medical school. And it worked out that
Something had happened to your dad at that point, right?
yeah, he got very ill
While you were in college?
in high school,
Oh, okay.
and he had empyema, which is a complication of pneumonia,
Mm-hmm.
where he had a collection of exudate, I call it pus, around his right lung. And he had to be in the hospital in Richmond for about 6 months,
Wow.
and they couldn't get him to stop draining. So they finally sent him down to Duke Hospital in Durham, North Carolina. And they did a thoracoplasty on him, in which they took out 10 of the 12 ribs on his right side. So the lung would collapse and stop the irritation. And it finally stopped draining, and
Wow.
he ended up surviving on one lung for the rest of his life. And that was the experience that introduced me to medicine.
And did you live close to that area so you could go see him in the hospital, or were you?
We lived about an hour and a half away.
Wow. And he was there for 6 months.
Yeah, I got up to see him about once a month.
Wow. And was his body kind of deformed a little bit after that, wasn't he? It
Yeah.
sounded like there was something on his back.
Yeah. Well, the right lung was collapsed, and his shoulder dropped on that side because they didn't have the support of the rib cage.
Yeah, I remember that.
But he was an amazing guy. He died when he was 70 of prostate cancer. And I had prostate cancer myself when I was 70 years old. And fortunately, they had better treatments at that time than they did when my dad developed it. So I was able to undergo radical surgery and orchiectomy and radiation. And I'm still alive 20 years later. And my PSA has been normal ever since I had the surgery.
It's a lab test that
Plus
validates that there's not an increase in a certain protein or hormone that would be indicative of cancer. So,
But your father wasn't so lucky with the prostate.
No, he
didn't have the treatments back in
they
those
didn't
days.
have the treatments.
When you were a student, was he particularly proud that you became a Yellow Jacket like he had been?
Yeah, I think he was. He never came up to the games, but I think he was
They
he
were
was
very-
he was handicapped with this illness thing, and he didn't really get over that until I was already a physician.
And they were very poor, you know, he had a lot of children and he was a minister and they struggled. So I
Yeah.
think it was a lot of hardship for them to give Dad money,
Yeah,
help him out. I mean, I know he did, Because he talks about it in a letter that I have in your book there, Dad.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I remember I wrote him a check for $300 after I had been in practice for about 6 months, and I sent it to him saying, "This is partial payment for what you expended on me during my education." And he sent it. He wrote back and said he didn't need the money. He was going to donate the check to the Children's Foundation in Richmond Children's Home, they called it. So he was a great man.
He was indeed. In fact, there's a song that was written about him by a good friend of Dad's and mine, Mark Pearson, who's a member of the Brothers Four.
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard of the Brothers Four?
I
It's
have.
an old folk group.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mark is an independent songwriter and performer, just in addition to doing the Brothers Four thing. But he heard the story of Dad's dad and put together a composition, kind of a folk song about him, and it's called I think "Everyone Is Welcome."
Mhm.
Everyone is welcome in the house of the Lord is basically, and he hasn't. The song is copyrighted, but I don't think it's actually been released or available publicly. But Mark has performed it privately, and it's a pretty neat little song.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark lives about an hour away from here. He's a longtime friend and an entertainer.
He and Chuck just got back from a week's walk around the base of Mount Rainier. It's a trail called the Wonderland Trail. Yeah,
it's kind of like the Appalachian Trail. Only it's much shorter distance. It's about 100 miles. And we did a backpacking trip about a month ago, and didn't totally finish it, but we got quite a ways around. So anyway.
Anything else? Any?
No, I can't think of anything.
Okay.
I think what amazes me is his memories from those 4 years. And when you think of, his age and how long ago, I mean, it's just unbelievable that he can remember dormitories and halls and teachers. And I graduated from college in, 60 or 71, 72. I can't remember any of that.
40 years ago.
I can't remember who my teachers were or what the door. I mean, I remember
graduated
my
in
dorm.
02 and I can't remember my teachers. I think it's remarkable.
So I think it must have just been a different world then. And they didn't have every hour you weren't going to a different class with a different teacher.
The
I
pace
think that-
was very different.
Yeah, and I think they had the same teachers for every year probably. And
I have nightmares now about being at Randolph-Macon and not,
what a way to finish the interview.
and not knowing
Where to go.
where to go, or where my next class is going to be.
Or the famous pop quiz memo, or the famous pop quiz nightmare, that one where there's a test and you didn't study, you didn't prepare, you're dead.
I don't have nightmares of that, but I have the same nightmare you do, Dad, where it's like the first day of school and I don't know where to go.
Yeah.
I don't know where my class is.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? You still have those, huh?
Not very often anymore, but I did for the first 10 years of my marriage.
Something about Mom that brought out that anxiety.
He has a love for Virginia, though. It's his hometown, and I think it holds a special place in your heart, doesn't it, Dad?
Yes, it does.
Well, and we do, as a result. I mean, growing up as we have, and we're still a close family after 60-plus years. Virginia's always kind of this wonderful place that is out there someplace. I mean, we've gone back and visited, obviously, but it's
Not often, though.
out of all the other parts of the country, that's the one area where I think, you know, we would probably think of as a second home sort of a thing, given what Dad's told us over the years.
I mean, Dad started losing his vision. I thought it was closer to 10 years ago, because Mom was in pretty good shape when we took that trip, I think.
Yeah.
But Dad was getting macular degeneration and was losing his eyesight. And so we said, let's go back. We wanted to see all these homes and all these parsonages and churches. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
road trip.